We're out here at Lost Maples State Natural Area on the West Trail. And right now I have about 1.5 miles plus a quarter mile. Once I link up with the East Trail, I've got about another quarter mile to the parking area. But so far, I have been hiking for 3 hours, 14 minutes, and 32 seconds. And I've almost had all my water. I have 2 more bottles of water and a 7-Up. And some snacks that I've, eaten along the way, but I still have a few more of those as well. The one thing that I didn't bring this time, an extra pair of socks. And it didn't seem like I would need socks until I crossed over a stream down around Primitive Camping Area G. There was about 8 to 10 inches of water that I had to cross through. And, these Merrell boots have been pretty good. They have the mesh lining and everything. It seems like the water was able to, be squeezed out pretty rapidly. And, air flows in and out. So, but before that, I was going to say no blisters, but now with wet socks and the 3 or so miles I've marched since then, there's a good chance that I will have one on my big toe. And my quads are definitely getting a workout. I've crossed a lot of riverbeds, tree roots, fallen trees, steep inclines, and when they label them steep, they do mean steep. There's been some really interesting terrain, some fauna, and saw a rattlesnake at one point, took some pictures of that. And I think there was another one, I just couldn't spot it. I could hear it slithering around in the leaves, the fallen maple leaves. But this is supposed to be a great place to go in the fall. And here it is, Labor Day weekend, so we're still at about 100 degrees. If you look at my pictures, you'll see that I was pretty hot. Not to mention carrying around a hiking pack with a lot of my gear in it, just in case, for emergencies, this, that, and the other. But I have depleted some of the water, so some of the weight is at least dwindling here and there. But there's been a couple of times where the trails aren't very well labeled, and you'll naturally veer off course, but then you can correct later on. But I guess they could use more signs out here. Now this is obviously a trail. It's just in the heavily wooded areas where there's a lot of leaves that are falling. It's kind of hard to differentiate which is which. And of course, like I said, you have to correct. There's been about 3 or 4 times that I've had to do that today. So there is no cell phone coverage out here. I have Verizon. So I'm interested to see if my Track My Steps works at all in this situation on my iPhone. If it does, that will be very interesting to see how many stairs I've climbed. The health monitor, I think it tracks every 10 feet or 15 steps or something to that effect, to let you know how many flights of stairs you've climbed in a day. For those that don't like to take the elevator, like my coworker over at the University of Texas Health Science Center, every time I walk with him, we have to take the stairs. But it's all good. He's definitely keeping me in good shape. One of my buddies that went to Baylor. But yeah, I think I've been able to manage about 2.5 miles an hour so far, for the most part. There's been a couple of times where I've seen a park bench that's called out or yelled out my name, and I've stopped for a little bit. Like I said, I would really love to have a pair of socks right now. If I saw another hiker or camper, I'd be willing to give them about $10 for a pair of socks. But yeah, you live and you learn. So at least next time, I looked at the website and I looked at a lot of other things, and I packed accordingly, but just didn't anticipate that. And then even those areas that aren't too deep of water, you still have to cross over steps. And see, here's one of those markers I was talking about. There's not a whole lot of them, but luckily right now this is pretty easy to decipher. in the wilderness. But yeah, there's some slippery rocks, of course, and some have algae on them. And tell you what, there's been some little pools of water from waterfalls that have been breathtaking, to say the least. They have signs up that talk about the varieties of bass, the different species of bass that can be found out here. And apparently they have hunting and fishing permits that they sell at the ranger station, but I'm not sure how far that goes and what seasons. So, but the water's been so clear, I've been able to take some pictures of bass swimming around in the pools of water. And this morning it rained a little bit, so it's a little humid. You know, that explains some of the water in the creeks being up. It sprinkled a little bit, and when I got out of my truck this morning, it was about 80 degrees, 81. And since then, I think they were calling for it to get up to maybe 100, 101 today, about this time. So, but yeah, I've seen some European tourists out here, and that's really cool. You can hear some different accents as you walk by some people. You can hear some German. I think there was one that was French. And then, of course, some that speak redneckese like myself. You can see there's a few Texans out here. It is hot. But once it turns to the fall, which is soon upon us here, very close, closing in, they say that this is just like incredible. These trees, they turn purple and orange and yellow and red, just colors that you've never seen before. A lot of the maples especially, and of course you got a lot of evergreens out here too. But seen some caves, some cliffs, some areas where it echoed down in the canyons and valleys. But it's definitely worth coming out. It's about 80 miles west of San Antonio. And here once again you can see one of these primitive camping area signs. But yeah, it's definitely worth coming out to. I'd say this is more challenging than Enchanted Rock by far. And Enchanted Rock, I went there about a month ago, and I remember climbing up. But of course I rode my motorcycle there, so I was wearing jeans and long sleeves, you know, for protection on a motorcycle. Didn't really intend to hike that, but I ended up doing it in motorcycle boots, jeans, and long sleeves. And that was interesting. You know, I was joking at the time that it looked like maybe even a squirrel would fall off of Enchanted Rock. So steep. And there's been some steep areas here. See, the difference with Enchanted Rock is it's a little bit more direct, and it's obviously smooth. Here you have loose rock, very jagged rock, and some obstacles to cross over here and there. And this is just like a dream right now for my ankles and my knees. Right here is just great, especially this overhang. And if you do come out here, besides water and socks, bring sunscreen and insect repellent. That's always a good idea. I wear 50 SPF and, you know, off. Definitely want to keep the ticks off of you. And I like to wear a wide brimmed hat too, especially when you're out, you know, exposed for 4 or 5 hours. It's definitely good to keep your nose and your ears covered. So at least us from with ancestors from Northern Europe, it's at least a good idea for us. But here you can see some different types of rock that has been eroded by streams. And we're definitely closing in on the parking area now. You can tell that the trails are much more heavily traveled. And, you know, it's funny, getting out of the city. You know, I live in San Antonio. I live in Midtown. And it's just really great to get out of the city and breathe some fresh air, smell some evergreen trees, and get a little bit of exercise, and, you know, talk to some people out here, some good friendly folks, the few that I've encountered. And you know, it's just something that's $6, you know, I mean, $6, and it's supporting nature, so, and conservation. So you definitely can't complain about that. And it looks like there's plenty of parking now. Once the trees start to change colors, I would imagine that it's probably going to get a little bit more packed. They say that October, November are their big tourist seasons here. So the good thing about that is if you come here when it's cooled off, not only will your body thank you for it, as opposed to this 100 degrees that I'm in right now, but also Jake won't be out if it's cold. And those of you who don't know what Jake is, that's the colloquial for snake. And like I said, I think I've seen two. I've definitely seen one, taking some pictures of it. And it was a black tip up in the mountain. At one point I was on a ridge line, and that was really interesting. I just remember from when I was out in New Mexico, I used to work at White Sands Missile Range. So we used to have all kinds of briefs, safety briefs about wildlife and so on and so forth. And they said that the black tip is not as big, but is very venomous. And apparently they dwell in the mountains and rocky areas, which you can see around. It looks like there's lots of habitats here. But I'll tell you, the camera, there's been a couple of times where I've set up the tripod and I've taken some pictures on the cliffs. And I just don't think it does it justice. This is a really good Nikon camera that I'm using. It has a lot of megapixels and a pretty good zoom. But even when you get home and put it on a widescreen laptop, you're going to be a little disappointed. I found myself over the 5,000 or so pictures that I've taken with this camera. There's been some opportunities where, you know, it's really impressed me, and then other times I've been a little disappointed. But I mean, it's just you got to get out here and see this. And you can see right here some trees just growing out of rock, and you can tell that the water's definitely been higher than this before. And like I was telling you about earlier, this is just one of those little crossings that you have to do. And for the most part, I feel like my quads and arches and other things, I think I'm doing pretty good. It's just the one thing that's hurt me is having wet feet, and especially when you're going up and down rocks and your feet are sliding around, you're going to have that separation of your dermis and epidermis, and you're going to get that fluid built up, and obviously we call that a blister. So it just goes to tell you that always, you know, pack that right guard, moisture wicking spray, and maybe some foot powder in your hiking bag. And you know, always be ready. You can see here there's a lot of diversity. There's some trees out here. I kind of feel like Bob Ross sometimes the way that I describe this stuff. Like anthropomorphic rocks and trees and waterfalls. But I tell you, there's some trees out here that have stood the test of time. They say that this was once inhabited by Apache Indians. Back in I believe it was the 17th century, when the Spanish conquistadors came through here and documented Apache Indians living in these areas. So it's definitely got a lot of history. I was hoping to find some hieroglyphics and other things, but I'm sure there are in some of these caves, but nothing visible. And but anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this little bit of a tour of a massive state natural area here in Texas. It's definitely worth visiting. And on the topic of parks, I'd like to say Big Bend National Park. That's a national park, not a state park. What an incredible place. If you have 5 days, go check that out. It's just absolutely incredible, absolutely amazing. I have a Toyota 4Runner, and I went out there on a 4-day weekend, and I had a cooler loaded with ice and orange juice, lunch meats, sodas, waters, and so on and so forth. And I had a blast. I just put the back seats down and had some camping bags or some sleeping bags back there, And there I recommend that if you're not the kind to do things primitive, if you don't like to sleep under the stars and you like cabins, a lot of those cabins, it should be noted, they don't have air conditioning, so definitely plan your trip accordingly. You want to wait once again to the fall or spring, early spring perhaps. But that's where the Rio Grande crosses through at the Big Bend of Texas, and it is something else. You can canoe out there. There's supposedly a little restaurant you can walk across the Rio Grande to, and there's some great off-roading if you like to off-road. Of course, lots of hiking, and you see everything out there from motorcyclists to Jeeps that are outfitted with trail armor and skid plates and so on and so forth. But also some good biking. But just know that gas stations out there are few and far between. If you've ever come out to Texas, you'll discover that sometimes it's a big state, so just make sure that you get plenty of gas. But anyway, this is John Epps. I'm gonna go ahead and sign off for now.